Thank you for coming out to celebrate Blackness, to celebrate food. That's the real reason you're here. But our doctor and Chef Sheri is here, and she has a fabulous presentation.
No doctor. Just share.
Chef.
Just share it.
She has a fabulous presentation set up for us today. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you for having me.
The programming is brought to you by the Iberia African American Historical Society Center for Research and Learning. And so we do a slew of different programming. So make sure that you stay in tune and in touch with all of the programming that we do. And so now I'm going to introduce Sheri, and then she'll get started. So Sheri L. Raleigh is the chef, instructor, and owner of Cast Iron Skillet LLC in Waco, Texas. She has cross-cultural experience teaching community cooking classes for various educational, hospitality, healthcare organizations. So Cast Iron Skillet Culinaire provides culinary excellence and team building experiences specializing in Creole cuisine. Sheri holds a Master of Science in Human Relations and Business from Amberton University in Garland, Texas, and a Bachelor of Science in Food and Nutrition from Northwestern State University in Natchitoches.
Yay, go Demons, welcome Demons.
In 2002, Gifts from the Ancestors Foodways project developed a 5-part series YouTube exploring how West African foodways influence Creole cuisine. And Sheri believes food tells a beautiful story.
It does.
It creates opportunities that bridge cultural divides and build strong food communities. And with that, Sheri is going to start her presentation.
All right, thank you, Jordan. Well, welcome. Comment ça va?
Ça va bien.
All right. So without further ado, I'll just go ahead and start because anything else? Okay. All right. So I will tell you just a little bit about my background. I know Jordan gave me a great introduction. In 1987, my cousin, Teresa Armentor Rector, decided she was going to do family history and research. And so, and I will tell y'all, I'm not a stay in the put instructor. So I used to teach teenagers. So y'all have to get used to that. So I will move around. Yeah, keep that proximity control. You know, you teachers out there, y'all know what I'm talking about. So anyway, Teresa, all of our family is from Laurelville. And so she decided there was some missing pieces and we needed to get our family history. So I have to give kudos to her because she was the one that initiated all of this. At that time, I was later on, I guess about 95, I moved to the East Coast, or what they call the East Coast, really is North Carolina. And so I got to spend a lot of time with her. And so she put me to work, of course, on the genealogy. And I had a friend one time to tell me, if I had not known that you guys were cousins, I would have known it, because as soon as y'all sat down at the table, we just started going back and forth. And so she's passed away now, but she is the reason we did our first family reunion, because she made me promise when I left DC. She said, here, take Eleanor with you. And Eleanor is a picture of our great grandmother. And so she said, take this because nobody else is going to care about it but you. And so I want you to promise to get all of the family together. Well, I did as she asked, you know, because I do what my elders tell me to do. Liz can tell y'all that. And but unfortunately, she had Alzheimer's. So she was not able to come to Lake Charles. We did the first one in Lake Charles, and then we did the second one in St. Martinville. So hopefully we're doing the third, y'all. Well, everybody wants to come back to St. Martinville. So we're doing the third one next year. So I will tell y'all that. So I grew up in Lake Charles. And so my father and mother were a lot older. I was their late in life child. So I didn't get to grow up knowing a lot of my cousins. So I was really a curious child, you know. And when you grow up by yourself a lot, you tend to be nosy. And so I was really nosy. I learned how to cook with my grandmother and my mother. And y'all have to excuse my voice. Sometimes I do have vocal cord problems. So if it gets weak, I'll get some water. And so I began looking at that research. And so Teresa said, why don't you put the cooking? I was researching, doing recipes and thinking about doing a cookbook. She said, why don't you put the two together? I said, oh, that's a lot of work. And so this is 20 years in the making. So I'm just telling y'all that little story to tell you that. So Teresa is shining down on me because it took a lot of work to get there. But I started Gifts from the Ancestors Food Waste Project because I thought that was fitting. I had a editor, not an editor, but a agent tell me, well, you're going to have to change that name because people are not going to know what you're talking about. And I said, oh, no, I'm not going to change the name. I'm going, that's not what we're going to do. I'm going to keep the name and I'm going to educate them about what it means. So that's where the uplift, enrich, and educate come from. I didn't start teaching high school until I was 44. So I came into the classroom that, everybody looking like, ooh, you were crazy. But I will tell y'all, it was one of the best experiences of my life, teaching culinary arts, taking my students to state. And so they began to help me. They were interested in my background. So I had a lot of little helpers along the way. Okay, sorry. So today we're going to cover these 4 areas. I'm looking at Acadiana history. Who are the Acadians? And then Creole culture, heritage, language, tradition, and food. And then we're going to look at family heritage. Number 3 came about when I started teaching at McLennan County Community College. My department chair asked me to teach a West African class. She had somebody teaching Creole food and Cajun cuisine, kind of, sort of. But I'm saying kind of, sort of, because he was using cans, okay? And let me hear the moans. So yeah, so she didn't want me to replicate that. So I said, well, I'm not from West Africa. I'm of West African descent, but I'm not West African. So I always want to be authentic to what I'm talking about, because that authenticity is very important to me. So that's how I started looking at, well, what is the West African link? Because Teresa always pointed me back to West Africa when she was doing her research. The day she found our 2 times great-grandmother's name, she was in the Library of Congress. So she couldn't wait to call me. She'd say, I found her. And I'm like, okay, I can hear you. But yeah, she was elated. And so then we'll look at Creole and West African cuisine and the herbs and spices and all of that. Okay, and I just want to thank the community partners. I'm not a reading instructor, so I don't read to y'all because I feel you're all adults. And if you do have questions, I would like for you guys to kind of hold them to the break so I can get through part of the presentation, but I'm very open to questions. And so I want to thank Dr. Phoebe Hayes and the Iberia African American Historical Society, the National Trust here at Shadows-on-the-Teche, and then Iberia Parish and KLFY, because they have been very hospitable and gracious to me. Although KLFY maybe get up at be there at 5:30 in the morning. I'm a May baby. I am not a morning person. So, but I appreciate that. Okay, so when we're looking at Acadiana history, what do y'all think about when I say that? A mix? Okay. So when you look at the history, I go straight back to the First Nations, going to the native tribes that were here, the Chichamacha, yeah, thank you. the Homa, and y'all correct my thing if I mispronounce, but all of that, and I always heard about the Atakapa Ishak and tribes and the Kashada, of course, but so they were really the original inhabitants. So when we get our mind fixed on that, sometimes we make a little shift instead of thinking about what happened after that. And then the arrival of the Acadians, I do have some heritage with that because my mother's family were tray hands. And so if you've been to the museum in St. Martinville, you see that long list of tray hands. And yes, some of them were Caucasian and some of them married into women of color. So, an African-American woman, which is her grandfather. So Peter Trahan was her grandfather. And I'll get to that in a minute. Then we look at, what happened with the Spanish and French rule. So when you think about the timeline and looking at Acadiana, it puts it into more perspective for you. Because I think sometimes we get stuck on that little hamster wheel and we don't think outside of that. And then I say African arrival, but we know it wasn't a voluntary arrival. And so we're looking at the first slave ship to come from Ouida only a year after the founding of New Orleans. So that was very new. The port of New Orleans was very new. I just recently took a trip to St. Lucia. And so I say St. Lucia is really a kissing cousin to Louisiana because a lot of their Creole customs, their foodways, I felt like I was at home there. And so a lot of their dishes are very in sync with what we cook. And then, of course, in 1971, Governor Edwards recognized Acadiana as, a distinct part of Louisiana in terms of the parishes. So I just wanted to give that little timeline. So when you're looking at, from 1600 all the way to 1971, and, it's a lot that occurred. Okay. And then we had the Louisiana Purchase, of course. So we all know that Louisiana is just not the boot initially. It went all the way up to the boundary line up towards Canada and up near Oregon. So that was a lot of property. People made a lot of money. So I just want us to get a frame reference for what I'm talking about. Okay. All right. Then we're talking about Louisiana Creoles. And I know that a lot of us have a lot of opinions about what is a Creole. I'm not going to even ask that question. Because, growing up, people had a lot of stereotypes, a lot of hang-ups, a lot of that, but we're not going to discuss. We're going to discuss the good part. And so when we, because I was discussing with one of my cousins who is a scholar, he's really a scholar. And some of y'all might know him, Christophe Landry. Okay. So we've had some back and forth, but, the gens de couleur and the people of color, the enslaved Africans with the French heritage. Now, when Teresa was doing her research, Christophe was in graduate school. So he used a lot of her family history with his graduate studies in his master's program. And so that is how I really got connected with Christophe, was through Teresa, because they used to go to the Creole conferences and they were going to one in California, I believe, and they were presenting there. And what I have found in my research is Creole heritage is international, because it's not just here. Because I'm telling you, when I was listening to the St. Lucians speak the Creole, I started to hear same. Yes, as my cousin said, Saint Martin. Yeah. So, and I got to cook with one of the chefs, and you guys will see that in a little bit there. And so the Creole food which most of our recipes are passed down from our heritage, from our grandparents, our great-grandparents, women at the church who cook. I attended Sacred Heart in Lake Charles. So my cousin was Florence Fontanet was the food service director. So she would tell me when I come to school, don't talk to me because I'm at work. Don't come up here and say cousin Florence. And so, so I had all of that, their influence. And then my mother was Protestant, so she went to New Sunlight Baptist Church in Lake Charles. And they had a whole team of cooks that I learned to cook from there, besides she and my grandmother. And then when I started visiting my sister and her husband, who is from St. Martinville, Patrick Simon, we started cooking together. So I've learned from had a lot of influences in my cooking career. And then, of course, our traditions. My second digital cookbook, I talked about Creole celebrations, because to me, the Creole soiree in the community was the lifeblood. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and so I lived for those parties, especially clearing, because I got to drink the excess wine and champagne that they left on the tray, right? And work with my mom to get everything all set up. So all of those traditions. Why do you think they did the soirees? What was the purpose of that? Yes, fellowship, I heard exchange. Right. And they were limited in where they could go, right? In where they could rent places other than the Knights of Peter Claver Hall or the Masonic Temple or some of those places. So they were really limited, but those parties were the lifeblood of our community, our neighborhood. So the party would start at my mom's house. We would start with an appetizer. Then we would go over to the Duplichan's house and we would have some dish there. Then we would go over to Aunt George's house and we might have dessert. And of course, it had to end with them playing what? Pity pat, dominoes, big wheels. Yeah. Yes, all of that. And so, so the soirees were hosted in homes and it really strengthened our community. Don't y'all think we missed some of that a little bit? Yeah, we miss that now. And so these are some pictures and I want to see if y'all know where I am in the picture. Let me see. Can y'all find me? Right, a party crasher at 5. My mother's friend, who was from Jonesville, Louisiana, her son, who is the gentleman in the white shirt there, Alonzo, was graduating. So I heard him and his brother McKinley talking about the party, that they were having this party. So I said, oh, party, okay. So the day for the party came, I got out my little dress. Y'all see, I was stylish, had my little tennis shoes. And I said, okay, mama, come on, take me to the party. She said, what party? I say, Lonzo's. She said, girl, you too little for that. That's for high school. I said, he said I could come. So they put me in the middle and took that picture, and his mom gave me that picture before she passed. And the one at the top, this is a Creole soiree at the home of Lydia and Agnes Foucault. And my dad is the Lydia. Yeah, Lydia. This is Lydia Foucault, and my dad is right there. So he was single at the time, and ladies didn't go around unescorted. So he was the driver and the escort and whatever else they wanted him to do. But that's a party at her house. And I used to love to go to their house. They had a beer tavern in the back, I just tell y'all that. And but their brother and them, they owned a lot of stuff. And that's the Oliviers. When Chris saw this picture, he said, you know the Oliviers? I say, yeah. And so they were at that party. And the lady who taught me this dish, that I'm going to make is the fourth from the left, and that's Gladys Miller. And so she taught me the dish I'm going to demo today. And the others are just stock photos, but I just wanted to point that out, that is what the soiree did. It built community and trust, and people didn't, you didn't have to worry about whether your neighbor was going to help you or not, but how much could they help you, right? And I like quotes, and I think Cesar Chavez sums it up. He said, if you really want to make a friend, go to someone's house and eat with them. The people who give you their food will give you their heart, and that's cross-cultural. I've had employees from all over the world, from India, from Mexico, from, Panama, everywhere. And they've all done that with me, made me feel welcome. Okay, any questions about that part? Let's have a little stopping point. Any questions? Okay, and so let's see. So now I'm going to get into the family history part. The Lawrence family started in Laurelville, and our matriarch was Zaire Noel, and the patriarch is Hippolyte Lawrence. So Hippolyte was a white French farm laborer, and Zaire was from Africa. We don't have it exactly pinpointed, but I haven't had it legitimated yet, but I did find some slave records that trace her back to Trinidad on a plantation called La Esperance. So from that union was born Hippolyte II, Clement Ulysses, which is my direct descendant, and he married Eleanor Wesley, and they had 15 kids, which my grandmother Adele was one of those 15. Okay. Okay, let's talk about that. There's a variation. When they moved to in the research, Lorins, Lorins, is the spelling that we find. Sometimes it's a double RINS, but later through the census, when they put the English spelling on it. And that's one thing when you do research in Louisiana, you have to look at the French, the Spanish, the English. You have to look at all of those variations of spellings, because a lot of the census takers were not literate. They spelled phonetically by what they heard you say. And like, for example, one of my mom's descendants, when he went to Port Arthur, or as we say, Port Arthur, right? He went to Port Arthur, and they thought he was saying his name was Trahan, but they heard Troy. So they changed a whole lineage of them's name is spelled Troy, but their name is not Troy. Trahan. But because of his accent, they thought he said Troy. I don't know how they got Troy out of there, y'all. I don't know. Yes, absolutely. He worked at the Greyhound bus station in Port Arthur for years, and he went by Willie Troy, but his name was really Trahan. Okay, and then my mother's descendants are from Vermilion Parish. So her patriarch was Pierre Trahan, and he married Marie John, and they had 6 children, including my grandmother, which I never got to meet, which is Marie Noella Trahan. So that shows you that lineage. Now, we got some crossover lineage. So Celeste Trahan married Leon Lawrence. And so, but he was not the son of Zaire. He was the son of Henriette Madison. And if y'all want to ask me about that, I'll tell you. But he married Celeste Trahan, and she was the sister of Pierre, which is my grandfather. And they had 11 children. So I'm just showing you the crossover connection that I have between the Trahans and the Lawrences. This is Hippolyte's immigration document, and Christoph actually got that for us, where he came into New Orleans, and it shows you the date of February 2nd, 1837. And it shows the witnesses that he had come into that area, and then he came to St. Martin Parish. Okay. And now we suspect that he had a family in France too. We did not trace those descendants back, but it's possible. It's very possible. And it's possible, I will tell you, that his name wasn't even Lawrence. Because in the early days, people would say, "Hi, I'm Hippolyte from Lawrence." And then that would become their last name. So it's possible. When my daughter and I were going to Italy with some culinary students, we were watching you know how you watch the plane and you're tracing the path where you are. And I said, "Amaya, that's Lawrence, France." And we got all worked up on the plane. So that's highly possible. But here it shows on the census that he did own some enslaved Africans. And Henriette Madison was one of those. And so she did have a set of children for him. Zaire, it never shows that any ownership from her. He did deed her some land, but in Laurelville, but you know, I'm not really sure about that until I confirm that link to Trinidad. So she could have been a free woman of color at that point. And these are the records that I found that are related to her. Her father was Jacques Noel and her mother was Julianne Noel. And so those are just some of the records that I found that connect her. I don't have a photograph of her. I wish I did, but that shows that. And these, if you're doing research, those British colonial slave registers and the ships are where to look, because they have tons of information. So this is how I'm in, I guess 2015, I did the ancestry genealogy test, you know, the DNA test, DNA. And so, of course, there was a lot of debate about that in the beginning, and we know that they have greatly improved now, we'll tell you. But then in 2018, I think it was, or 17, I did the African ancestry DNA, which is a lot more complicated, but I did that, and I traced the African nation that my DNA, which, you know, they're tracing your mitochondrial DNA, so it's whatever comes from your mother. But these are the British slave records, and I did find Zaire, Julianne, and Jack. And it showed me that he was from the Congo, and she was from Santo Domingo. Right. So, so this is Ulysses. This is my great-grandfather, his wife, and my great-grandmother, Eleanor Wesley Lawrence. She was a Wesley. And then that's my grandmother, Adele Rena Lawrence, and she married in Raleigh. So, and my dad was the only child from their union. And so I found out something interesting too about Grandma Adele when I looked at those. You know, my dad was, I guess he finished the 8th grade at Sacred Heart, but today's standards, that would be like 11th grade. But he was a good mathematician. He worked at Coca-Cola for 47 years, but he called me Toot, and he said, "Toot, follow the math, because the math doesn't lie." So I said, I looked at that, I say, "Oh, Grandma, you were a cougar," because she was young. She was younger. She was younger than Jean Baptiste. But they married. My dad was born here in New Iberia in 1910. They married and moved to Lake Charles. And they bought a home in Lake Charles in 1922. And he passed in 1927. So it was short-lived, so I didn't get to meet him. But I will tell you, when you see my son's picture, he favors him a lot. Okay. Y'all stop me anytime now. The Trahans were a little easier because there's some cousins in Port Arthur who did some extensive research on the Trahan family. It's a book this thick. My cousin Danielle Fontenette, who is the city manager in St. Martinville, shared that with me. And when I opened that book up, I found all of my descendants. Y'all know I was up till like 2 o'clock in the morning. My sister, Josephine, who's passed now, she had come with me. We were planning a family reunion. She said, I'm going to bed. Y'all can stay up with this. But it was a great time. So this is her great-grandfather, her grandfather, my great-grandfather, Pierre. Don't have a picture of his wife, Marie John, but this is my grandmother, Marie Noella Trahan Broussard. She married, my mom was a Broussard. And so I didn't even know, through the records, I found he's buried in Lake Charles with one of his sons. So yeah, so that's them. And then this is my mom and her parents. And so both her parents died before she turned 7. So that's why I didn't know them. Her mother had TB and she passed in New Orleans. And then her dad passed prior to that. So she grew up in Port Arthur. And so Liz, my cousin, who I was telling y'all from St. Martinville, that's how we became close, because every summer we were going to my sister's house or we were going to Port Arthur. And so she grew up in Port Arthur. And so this is my family. So my oldest daughter, Ariel, my son, Adrian, and Amaya, who y'all met. So see, I look at facial features. So when I look at that forehead, I see my great-grandfather. Because his dad has a widow's peak and he doesn't have that. Yeah. So when I did the African ancestry, this is when I discovered the Brahme Balanta people, and they're from Guinea-Bissau. They were a nomadic tribe, but their name means those who resisted. So that resonated with me. I say, that's why everybody say I'm so stubborn. But because I always disagree, I say, no, I just stand on my convictions. It's just my opinion. But so yeah, so they were a very nomadic tribe of people. And unfortunately, today, their community has been, just basically stripped of all its resources. It's a very poor area. I told Danielle takes a group from Southern University to Senegal. And what is it? It's the little island off the coast of Senegal. But I would love to go there. Yes, Gorial. Gori. Gori, we do. If you guys have done your ancestry.com, have you done your DNA test? Yeah. Okay. Anybody done African ancestry? Okay. And it's gotten, it was very expensive in the beginning, but now, with everything they have Afterpay. So you can do it into like 3 or 4 payments because it is more expensive. Dr. Gina Page and the other gentlemen who are co-partners of African ancestry, what they have been doing is taking trips back to Africa and revealing people's DNA history there. So they worked with me really well, and I feel benefited from that. But this is from African ancestry. So it's showing my parent number 1 and parent number 2, my mom and my dad, and then it's giving you the breakdown for the greatest percentage is from Cameroon, Congo, West Bantu peoples, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, etc. But you know, at that time, it was all one area. There were no countries divided up in Africa. That was the Congo was vast, a vast area. Mhm. Say it again. I'm sorry.
I was just telling you that Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Benin, and Togo, that was part of
French West Africa. And they divided it up even more. Right. Okay. So this was our family reunions. This is the first one in Lake Charles in the purple shirts, and then that's here in St. Martinville. We were at La Maison. And so, you know, from Teresa's encouragement, I did feel compelled to do it. And that's why I wouldn't give up that name, Gifts from the Ancestors, because I felt like they had given me a gift. And how, you know, it would be bereft of me to just toss it to the wind and not use that. So I did what I did because I had limited knowledge of some areas. I did those family trees and had everybody to do theirs. And the second one we did, Mary and Christine showed up. And so I had no information on Uncle John. And so I was just so excited. I told Danielle, find him a t-shirt, you know? And so we were just so excited. And so that's how we connected. So, you know, when I look back at the Creole soirees, when I look back at family, and I told y'all my 4 tenets: family, faith, food, and friends. So this is Teresa Armentor Rector. This is her daughter, Joan McLaughlin. She lives in Washington, D.C. And so Teresa is the bedrock of all the research that me and Christoph stand on. And I know he knows that too. And she did it with no computer, you know. When she was going to do that presentation, my husband at the time and I were there with the kids, and we were headed all out on the floor, you know, connecting all of these papers that she had printed out, trying to do a timeline. So can you imagine doing that with no computer? Yeah. Okay. So any questions about the family history, about ancestry, or African ancestry? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Oh,
And the man you showed there is our great uncle.
oh, what you say? See, family. Christine, get his name down so we can put him to work. Right.
I just pulled it up.
All right. See there? And and truly, yeah, and truly, say that again. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yes, that is awesome. Yeah.
On the last slide.
Yes. You'll go back. Yes, she actually, her father, she did find a great aunt that was willing to talk to her about her dad. Her mother is Lawrence, and she passed early on. So my grandmother and her sisters helped to raise her in Lake Charles, but she did know who her dad was, but she had no connection with the family. But going through cemeteries and records, she found a 96-year-old aunt of the Armentoirs. And when she said when she got to her home, she said, I've been waiting for you. Yeah, she said, I've been waiting for you. And they own the jewelry store, the Armentor jewelry store. Yeah, yeah. And when we had the reunion, this was so eerie. When we had the second reunion, Joan couldn't come. So my cousin Thale, who wasn't able to be here today, and Danielle, we were putting up stuff for the meet and greet. And all of a sudden, Thale said, look across there. And it was Armentor Jewelers. And so I say, y'all want me to go ask? And so what did I say about that little girl who was so curious? So, but they were closed. And I say, these people got us on camera. They gonna get us peeping in the store. So I took a picture of myself, pointed to the sign, and I sent it to Joan. So we had a big laugh about that, but she did get to connect with them. Yes, sir.
One other, Nancy Albatar, who came from New Iberia, she's the person that's really been responsible for New Iberia twinning with the Spanish cities.
Okay.
She does a lot of Spanish genealogy.
Okay.
connected all of these. Spanish
Yes.
parts, so
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yes. And Teresa ended up, I will just tell you, she ended up going to St. Mary's in New Orleans with the Sisters of the Holy Family. And one of my grandmother's sisters was a sister of the Holy Family. And they have if you haven't been to the National Museum in DC, they have a beautiful display of the Sisters of the Holy Family there. So, so she went to school there and then moved to Washington, DC. Yeah, because she was mad at her aunts for sending her away. I'm just so tell y'all that. Okay, so the Creole and West African cuisine, all of these things travel through the Middle Passage. And I will just tell you, in doing my research, what did I say I like to be? Let me see if y'all were listening. Nosy. Oh boy. Curious. That's okay. But I also like my research and my information to be what? Authentic. So I met with one South African chef and 2 West African chefs in preparation to teach that class, because it was going to be a cross-cultural class, because I didn't grow up there and I wanted to be authentic. So I don't know if you guys, but if you get a chance, look up Chef Pierre Thiam. He's in the National Museum. He has the Thiam, but it's called Thiam. Pierre Thiam. And so he has a restaurant called Yolele and a book of the same name. And if you go to my site, you'll see the resources and all of that. If y'all just click on that, you'll see that. But so Chef Pierre was really gracious to me, and I had never met him. We emailed back and forth. I met him through another chef who this week was cooking at the White House. I said, boy, how far have we come? But she went on a trip with him. He takes people to Senegal. They go and look at the foodways. They go where the pink salt is harvested and all of that. And it's out of Boston University. But at any rate, I got to meet Pierre this summer. Chef Air and I were at South by Southwest, and I saw his name on the lineup, and I was like, oh, I get to meet Pierre. And so it was just amazing to get to meet him. But he had a lot of information for me. And also another chef who I mentioned in my cookbook, which is Azaz Soka. And she's from Nigeria. And then I also consulted with another chef called, her name is Nampumelela Makweba. And so that was my research. I went directly to the source. Yeah. I didn't want to get it out of a book or wanted to talk to people. And so we FaceTime, we Zoomed, we did emailed, all of that. And so when you look at the enslaved Africans and the hardships they endured, their culinary foodways came with them. So certain things like, let's say we're talking about shrimp Creole. We know how to cook shrimp Creole, right? Everybody in here, right? Okay. The sister dish to that is West African ginger shrimp. And so you get to see the similarities. We use cayenne, they use Scotch bonnet. We use Creole seasoning, they use berry seasoning. So it's a lot of similarities. But what happened is when they came here, they used what they had. They brought the okra with them, the rice came with them. So when you're looking at the slave trade from the Atlantic, you see it's going mostly to South America and Brazil, Peru, and even to Central America, had way more enslaved Africans than we had here. So that's why when I go to St. Lucia, what do I find? I find me and I find the Creole culture there. So, so when you're looking at there was 5 million to go to Brazil. You can go on 5 million to South America. And then the West Indies, another 4,500,000, and then United States 500,000. So that kind of gives you that geographic, plane, just like these storms coming up the coast of West Africa. My play brother used to say, oh, that's another gift from the ancestors. They disturbing them. So, so that's where we get our gumbo, our okra. And so from the African diaspora, if you ever go to Paris, which that's on my bucket list 2024, but there's a culinary academy of Creole cuisine there. They do a international Creole competition there. So that is that's something that you can explore. When you're looking at the black-eyed peas, the cacao, the coffee, the okra, the rice, all of the spices and yams, and if you get an opportunity to watch High on the Hog, if you haven't watched it, that very first when they're in Benin in the market, and and the marketplaces when you go to the Caribbean are the same. Okay.
Very quick question.
Yes.
Where did they cultivate the rice? Was it around New Orleans?
Actually, the rice cultivation of the gold rice came through South Carolina. And they actually flooded that area to create rice paddies because the topography wasn't there. They forced it and flooded it and created. And the gold rice now is being preserved, but you can, the gentleman who grows the rice there that came from West Africa, he gives the rice seed away. He gives it away. He doesn't charge for it. So, but that's how it got there. Yeah.
Dr. Harris says, Dr. Jessica Harris said it came from the Niger River.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When they were, that actual crop. And there's another gentleman who grows it in New York, of all places, but he grows the gold rice in New York, and he also gives the seed away. Mm-hmm. So, and then in terms of Louisiana agriculture, we have the pecans, the mirlitons, the figs, the persimmons, all of those things. The what? Yes. And the thing about the watermelon, I told the group for Juneteenth last year, the watermelon and sweet potatoes and things that people didn't want to eat is what the enslaved Africans grew. They grew it to build wealth and to help them buy their land. And so, that wasn't a prized fruit or vegetable at all. So my first digital download, I focused on Creole, on okra and tomatoes. That's one of my favorite dishes. And so I learned how to prepare that from my dad's first wife's sister. I'll put that out there because everybody's family, because she said, they didn't give me any nieces and nephews, so you're my niece. And Mama's church was right across from where she had a rooming house in Lake Charles. So every Monday when I got tired of listening to them rehearse their music, the choir, I would do like this, and she'd say, go on, because she know I was going to Aunt Eva's house. So if I couldn't get okra at Aunt Eva's, I could get it at my cousin's. And so I would just walk around and see who cooked okra that day. But so it's from the Bantu word in gumbo. And the earliest discoveries are through the Moors and North Africa along the Nile River. West Africa is found in Egypt, Ethiopia, India, and the Middle East. So it's far reaching. And I'll tell you a story. My mother, when I lived in Dallas, I was working at Dallas ISD for school nutrition at that time. And my mother brought some ladyfinger seeds to Dallas. And my neighbor, who was from India, Mr. Patel, had a little garden. So their little thing in the morning, she would make community coffee, take it over to Mr. Patel, they talk about the garden. So she brought the ladyfinger seeds. Well, the next year when she came, he came over with a bag and it was full of okra. So he had grown the ladyfinger seeds. So, you know, that's why I say food bridges, you know, creating cultural diverse communities. So it bridges those divides. Because when you share a meal together and you partake and you have fellowship with one another, it changes things.
I have an off the wall question.
Sure.
Gumbo.
Yes.
People in this area go back and forth with gumbo from people in other areas who we think don't know how to make gumbo.
Right?
Okay, so what is a real gumbo? I know it's a combination of just whatever, but there is a limit. There is a line, I would think. I don't know.
Well, I can only speak to Southwest Louisiana gumbo. And so the key to the gumbo, you said it in your song, is the what? Is the roux.
That's right.
So I made my roux and I brought it. And my mom told me, y'all be able to smell it. And my mom made a dry roux. And so I seasoned my roux and you'll be able to see that it crumbles. Now, some people make a wet roux. They make a roux with oil. And so this has shortened it though. But it's the ratio between the flour and the shortening. So I'll give y'all a little piece to sample. Y'all can get that. But if this isn't right, the gumbo ain't gonna be right. Yeah, it's not gonna be right. Yeah, and the next part of the gumbo is your stock. It's the stock. So you can use a prepared stock, but African cuisine, as is Creole cuisine, is about building flavors. So you layering on those flavors. When you just throw it in the pot, it doesn't have time to season. So you're not gonna get the flavor palette. And somebody told me, we were at a workshop in Waco and they say, oh, we got a new restaurant in Waco. And I can't say the name on camera because I forgot I'm being streamed. But we got, and Chef Bear is giving me the eye and out there. But anyway, I went to this restaurant and I said, okay, I'll try it. And when I got in there, I say, no, because everything you could tell came out of a bag or a box, or it just was, it didn't have those flavors. So that's what I say for the flavors. So that's volume 1. And then what I'm going to demo is sauce piquant à poulet, which is the sister recipe to DG's chicken. And it's called Director's General's Chicken à Poulet. So this is a dish, this is actually that dish from my class. It's that dish is usually prepared for dignitaries in Nigeria. When someone important comes to their home, that's a recipe that they'll prepare. Well, when I started looking at the 2 recipes, it's very similar. And you'll see in the video where we're making Creole sauce, but then we also make the West African tomato stew, which is made with palm oil. We're using vegetable oil. They're using Scotch bonnet, we're using cayenne, but I mean, the dishes mirror each other. So that's what you'll find with that. And so that is the recipe. This is the new digital download that just came out in last Saturday. I collaborated with GO3 Vodka, which is a Black-owned vodka company in Houston, commemorating Juneteenth. So this is their 1st year anniversary, and they started last year. All of them graduated from HBCUs, and they give back 8.65% to the HBCUs, hence the 1865 and the 8.65%. So they did 4 cocktails for me for that book. And then I just wanted to show a little bit about the folk regions. We talked about the fact that a lot of our families went west to Texas. They even kept going to California. And so I'm finding a lot of cousins through Ancestry who are in California who've never been here. So I'm trying to get that California crew on board, Mary and Christine, so they can come to the reunion. And so I plan to go there for the holidays so I can meet some of them. But due to the oil boom and the flood that happened and they weren't able to rebuild, so they took their families to Lake Charles, Orange, Port Arthur, 5th Ward, Houston, which is Frenchtown, which was where our Mother of Mercy Church was found. So I just wanted to share that little bit with you on that. So, but this is the website, and eating together takes down cultural barriers. It builds and creates diverse food communities. And that's what I found teaching my classes in Waco, because who would have thought they would be interested in Creole cuisine in Waco, Texas? You know, I didn't think so at first. I was like, really? And then, you know, I met Chef Aaron. We worked for a year getting our videos together, because my nephew, who is in California, he's a screenwriter and an editor. He said, you need to do some YouTube videos and put your history down on there so you can find the recipes there. You can watch Chef Aaron and I cooking all of these recipes that I talked to you about on there. Okay. And that's just about me. Y'all done heard enough about me. And so these are some of the websites where I did the research. I don't know if y'all been on Creole Gen, but there's a lot of records and history through the Catholic Church on there. A lot of information about the Knights of Peter Claver. And so it gives you a little more depth of how they started the parishes in Texas. And then, of course, the Ancestry and the, this is the enslaved.org. So it gives you a lot of resources too for your research, for your own family history. And then, of course, we can't go to the YouTube, but if y'all click the QR code there, it'll take you there. You do that on your phone, it'll take you there. And special thanks to our sponsors, Tabasco and Community was very gracious. The Heirs Table, Chef Natasha Jorman, and Nuxie's Fine Catering with her gourmet seasonings, Chef Yolanda Henry, and Conrico Rice. Okay, so this recipe is sauce pecan au poulet. This is the way I learned to make it from my neighbor. And I'm doing it with chicken, boneless, skinless chicken thighs. So since my skillet is hot, I'm gonna go ahead and get that going. When I was younger, Miss Miller had a garden. And when she would go visit her family in California, I was in charge of watering and getting the eggs and dealing with this mean rooster I call Korish. And he didn't like me and I didn't like him. And so after years passed, one day Miss Miller said, I'm cooking sauce pecan. You want to come and learn how to do it? And I said, oh yeah. And I said, where's Korish? She said, in the pot. So I was like, oh yeah, let's celebrate. Oh, every time I would go get the eggs, he would nip at my ankles. And one day I was watering her snap beans and I just turned that hose this way. And so he stopped bothering me. But I don't know if that was really him in the pot. But typically this is made with a hen. Traditionally it's made with a hen. And I started using the cut up chicken, but you can you can use a hen or chicken breast. Chicken thighs kind of have a lot more flavor. All right. So I redid the updated the recipe using Chef Yo's seasonings, and then the traditional seasonings, of course, are your garlic, your smoked paprika, onion powder, and Creole seasoning, but I can't show the label on that. I haven't been using that particular one since being in Waco. We have a store there that has created some spices and has incorporated some African-American products there. So I've been patronizing those, and they're very, very good. And then I use in my sauce, I use the tomatoes, diced tomatoes. And I do have to say, I can only use this brand. I'm gonna just show it to y'all. Don't put it on the camera. But that's the only brand I use on the tomato paste. And did y'all get samples of the roux? So what do y'all think? Y'all didn't get it? It was going around. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So the way she taught me how to do roux, and she taught all of my kids, is if you feel it, it's not greasy when you feel it. Oh, I'm getting it on the carpet, but it's not greasy, and you can crumble it. So that's the way I know to make the roux, and that it's ready. So, okay, so our chicken is just about done, and I'm gonna be able to pull that off. Okay. I do need something to put that on though. That's all right. You know, I have to improvise. I don't want to put it on that hot thing. Yeah, okay. All right. So when you're making the sauce, I like to season my chicken and cook it separate, get the oil off so it's not greasy. But I use, of course, the Creole, what we call the Creole mirepoix, the Trinity. Okay, thank you. And I use the red bell pepper instead because it's a lot sweeter. I find that the green bell pepper has a tendency to make certain dishes bitter. Like I don't put it in gumbo. There's certain things I will use it in, but I don't use it in gumbo. And I think I was telling y'all earlier, I didn't get to say that about the mirlitons, but I did a class for, I know she had to leave, Denise's family online. They did a fundraiser for their family reunion. So I did the stuffed mirlitons, which we get in Texas, but they call them chayote. And so they're not really in season, so they weren't as ripe as I would have liked them to be. But that is another traditional dish. But I like to pour the oil off of everything. That's just me. But that's the way, you know, my grandmother and them taught me how to cook. So, you know, when you're adding in your bell pepper and your celery, you get that beautiful color. And then I do the white part of the green onion. And then I wait a little bit until this is sauteed enough, and then add in my garlic because I want the oil of that garlic to release, and I don't want to cook it out of the dish. There are some dishes where you can do a toasted garlic and it's fine, but for your oil to release out of that, the garlic, you need to not overcook it, and it'll start to burn on you. I think I brought a little knife. Now, you know, everything is better with a little butter. So even though I put some olive oil in this nonstick pan, I have to add a little what? A little butter, just a little bit. Real butter, unsalted. And so I like to use aromatics in my dishes too. I like to use fresh thyme, fresh parsley, anything fresh you can get. And that's another way to support our farmers and support our farmers markets is to buy the stuff, the ingredients fresh. I came here, I went into a store, I'm not gonna name it. But what did we find, Chef Air? We didn't find any, the first store. None. And the ones they had were in the organic section and they looked like they were old as me. So I'm just saying. Okay. So then we add in our garlic and then you start to build those what? Flavors. And I'm not going to add in this, but I'm going to show y'all what I did before I left home. So this is my Creole sauce. So I am cheating a little bit today, but my other chef friend, he told me, it's not cheating, chef. You just prepping. Yeah, you just taking a shortcut. But I wanted it to be right. So I wanted to show y'all what it looks like. So my Creole sauce, I cook it in bulk. And so I add all the seasonings. I also add Lime Perron to it. And I add a little bit of kitchen bouquet just for the color. And then I add the roux at the end. So we're going to let that heat up. Yes, ma'am. It was frozen solid when it left Waco. I thawed it overnight in the refrigerator. Ooh, and see, I got another one right here. Yeah, you freeze it. It freezes really well. You can make your sauces and freeze them in, put it in ice cube trays, pop them out. That's another way to do it. But, I just got something on my glass. So, that's another way to do it. But, so we're going to get this, let that heat, and then we'll add in some aromatics. And yes. I would say for the consistency and the quality to be good, maybe 3 months to 6 months. You know, I wouldn't keep it any longer than that because then it starts to get that freezer burn and the off flavor, especially tomatoes. You start to taste the acid, you know. Yeah. So we're going to put some of the thyme. I put the whole thyme straight in it, and then I just take it out, take the leaf out. You also have bay leaf you can add to that. Okay. So we're just going to let that come. I don't need this anymore. That ain't working. It had tomato paste, and I use chicken stock. You can use a prepared stock. I like to use that better than bouillon because it has less sodium, and then you can dilute that. I even put a little white wine in it, you know, towards the end.
So,
But
okay, so I know a lot of people have issues with tomato paste.
Mhm.
Tomato sauce.
No, I don't use tomato sauce. Tomato paste. I start. Yeah, tomato sauce. Yeah, tomato sauce helps you to build the richness of that because you're going to dilute it because it's a highly concentrated tomato. There, you can make your own puree by boiling tomatoes and then letting them cook down in a reduction because that is what that is. Well, if you have tomato sauce, if you have acid reflux, yes. That's why I have acid reflux, so I use tomato paste because it's sweeter. It's a reduction. Anytime you reduce something down, you know, you're going to bring out the natural sweetness because tomatoes are fruit. So you want to bring out that sugar in it and get that going. So now we cook him, not with gas, but we cook him with induction. And so y'all see all the oil that's left? Don't worry about it. See all the oil that's left? So we don't, that's something we don't want, right? So you don't want that greasy, oily taste in your sauce pecan. It's cool enough now, I think, Chef. Okay. And the smoky paprika just gives it that little smokiness, and so it does the Lien Perron. Now, if you have a fish allergy, don't use Lien Perron because it has anchovies in it. So I didn't know, some people don't know that, but it does have anchovies in there. So. Y'all didn't tell me my water was still up there. Okay. So that's basically our sauce piquant en poulet. So if you want your sauce to be a little on the thick side, and if you go on my Instagram, I posted that recipe and I have all the directions and instructions for making that. But you want your sauce to be, you know, not too thick, but you want a rich, flavorful sauce there. And the roux helps you to achieve that. You know, not too much roux. You don't want a lot of brown roux because it'll take over. And so we're not making gumbo, we're making sauce piquant. So we're going to put a little roux to add the thickening to it along with our tomato paste. And then when you add your chicken bouillon diluted, then you get a real smooth consistency of your sauce. See what I'm saying? I know my people. I know my people. I know them. Okay. So, sauce piquant, en poulet.